All coincidences with real people are random. If they tell you that this is not the case, ignore them. Blade, the well-known vampire hunter, was used to darkness and the horrors lurking in its depths. He lived in a world where night was not just a time of day, but a stage for an endless struggle between life and death. Every move he made, every action was aimed at one thing: the destruction of vampires that threatened humanity. He was half vampire and half human, which gave him unique abilities and an even more unique curse and eternal thirst for blood. But even Blade knew that not every vampire was the same. There were those who hid in the darkest corners of the world, ancient beings so old and powerful that their names had long been forgotten by people. One day, in one of these corners, Blade found something that made his blood run cold: a scroll written in an ancient language describing a powerful vampire known as Kain. Kain was not just a vampire, but the first of his kind. Legends said he was cursed by God himself and doomed to eternal existence, feeding on the blood of the living. His power surpassed anything Blade had ever seen. He was more than just a monster, he was the embodiment of evil itself. Blade studied the scroll for a long time, and its contents left him unsettled. The description of Kain was too detailed and real to be just a legend. Blade knew that if this ancient vampire existed, he needed to be destroyed at any cost. He began his journey following the traces left in history, gathering information, finding ancient books, artifacts, and testimonies. His path led him to an old town in Eastern Europe, where, according to rumors, Kain's last trace was found. The town was covered in fog, and even during the day, the sun barely broke through the thick clouds. The locals avoided talking about what lurked in the nearby forests, but Blade could feel the presence of evil. Every step he took on the cobblestone streets echoed in the silence, and it seemed that darkness was watching him from every corner. There was an old castle in the town, standing on a hill, its walls overgrown with moss, and the windows locked for decades. The townspeople believed the castle was cursed, and that no one had ever returned alive from it. But Blade was not an ordinary man. He had been preparing for this moment his entire life. His arsenal included silver blades, wooden stakes, holy water, and firearms loaded with special bullets capable of destroying any creature he might encounter. At night, when the fog thickened, Blade made his way to the castle. The moon, barely visible behind the clouds, illuminated his path. Every step was cautious, every movement calculated. He knew he would face something terrible, but did not know how terrible. The castle was cold and abandoned, but the air inside was filled with a strange energy that made the hairs on the back of Blade's neck stand on end. He moved through the ancient corridors, lighting his way with a flashlight. The walls were adorned with faded portraits of people whose eyes seemed alive in the dim light. Every step felt like cold winds rushing through the empty halls, as if the castle itself was alive and watching him. Blade found a hall covered in cobwebs, where a throne made of bone stood. This throne clearly belonged to a being without mercy. In the center of the hall stood an altar, surrounded by old books and scrolls stained with blood. This place was a sanctuary for the vampire, the ancient refuge of Kain. But despite all his preparation, Blade did not expect what happened next. From the shadows emerged a figure moving with inhuman speed. It was Kain. His skin was white as snow, his eyes glowed with red fire, and his presence instilled a fear that Blade had never felt before. Kain was not just a vampire, he was a monster embodying the darkest side of humanity. Blade did not flinch. He drew his silver blades and began his attack, but Kain was faster. With each blow Blade struck, Kain dodged with incredible speed and agility. Their fight was unequal, and each strike against the vampire only made him angrier. Kain laughed as Blade tried to break through his defenses, his voice booming like thunder, evoking terror. But Blade did not give up. He used all his skills to stand against the ancient vampire. At one point, he threw holy water into Kain's face, and the vampire howled in pain as his skin began to bubble and burn. This gave Blade a chance to deliver a decisive blow. He plunged the blade straight into the vampire's heart, and Kain fell to his knees. It seemed that victory was near, but then something went wrong. Kain lifted his head, his eyes still glowing, and began to laugh. Blade realized he had made a mistake. Ordinary methods could not destroy this ancient being. The vampire reached for his heart and pulled out the blade as if it were a mere splinter. He slowly rose, his wounds beginning to heal right before Blade's eyes. Blade understood that he could not destroy Kain alone. He needed something more, something that could once and for all rid the world of this evil. In the sanctuary, he found an old book he had not noticed before. It spoke of an ancient ritual capable of sealing a vampire's soul forever, but it required the hunter's blood and dark magic. Blade knew this was his only chance. He prepared everything necessary, using the ancient artifacts he had found in the castle. He drew a circle on the floor, spoke the incantations in the ancient language, and mixed his blood with the magical ingredients. When Kain attacked again, Blade was ready. He stood in the center of the circle, his blades glowing with magic. The vampire lunged at him, but as soon as his body crossed the line of the circle, the magic began to work. Kain screamed in pain, his body starting to twist and burn. Blade, bleeding and exhausted, continued to chant the incantations despite the hellish pain tearing him apart from the inside. Finally, the magic prevailed. Kain fell to the ground, his body beginning to disintegrate into ashes. Blade, drained and weakened, fell to his knees but kept his eyes on the enemy. Flames engulfed Kain, and his spirit was sealed in the depths of darkness. Blade thought he had won, but the magic was too powerful, and it began to consume him as well. He realized that this ritual was not just a weapon against the vampire, but a curse meant for those who dared to use it. His body started to burn, and he felt his own soul beginning to tear apart. The last thing he saw before descending into darkness was Kain's face, grinning in agony. Despite his destruction, this ancient vampire had still won. Blade understood that his sacrifice was in vain, and that the evil he had fought all his life would never be fully defeated.